So in this chapter 5, we'll be modelling the hands with minimal reference, and then modelling the hand guard and placing the hand on our character. Once again, we'll begin exactly where our last chapter left off, when we just finished modelling the arms. In this case, I decided to model the hands separately from the rest of the body. So what I'm going to simply do is choose a new layer to begin modelling the hand, and here I've just chosen layer 6. So I've turned that on and there's no other objects in the layer. So basically what we're starting with is a completely empty grid to begin modelling the hand. Place the 3D cursor close to the middle of the grid, and then by choosing Shift S, cursor to grid, it will snap it exactly to 0, 0, 0 in our world space. Now I've turned back on the background image, but I'm going to just open and change to a new image, which is our hand plate. There's a link to that image in the description below. And basically what I've done is just traced my hand out so that we've got a very simple outline of the hand shape. And we're going to use no other reference. So you can imagine this is an example where you don't have any high quality reference on hand. Okay, no pun intended. And basically, rather than just having an actual image of my hand there, I've opted to keep things quite simple and just going with a basic shape and proportions. So as you can see, I've just added a circle here, and I'm just going to scale a bit down on the Z-axis to squish it a bit flat. Just like before, I'm deleting the left side vertices and adding a mirror modifier, and then just moving the object as a whole a little bit to line up with the wrist. And I'm looking at my own wrist quite a bit as I model this to get an idea of the cross sections, how flat the wrist is, and where there might be areas that bump out a bit or dip inward. I've just made 2 more extrusions, and I scaled out on the X-axis to keep the hand the same height, and then just in side view there, I'd scale down a little bit as the hand gets closer to the fingers. Here I'm just going to use proportional editing a little bit to form a nice arc for these 2 loops. And then I'm just making sure to pay attention to, again, looking at my hand and seeing some of the vertices on the side there might be a little bit too high. So I'm just lowering and flattening those as it becomes closer to the sides of the hand. Again, just moving the vertices a little bit flatter near the fingers, as that isn't too much of a fat area in the hand. The knuckles will give a lot of the height, and we'll model them later. I'm also going to pay attention to the palm of my own hand and have a look at that. And I notice that a couple of vertices here can be pulled inward to help give a basic indication of the muscles that are on the palm. And now I'm just going to hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut and just roll the mouse wheel up, or press number 2 to make 2 loop cuts each on those faces. And now, after having the basic shape, I've got a denser mesh that I can work with. Again, using proportional editing, just so I don't have to move every individual vertex. And you'll notice if you look at your own hand, especially the palm area, with the palm facing you, that you've got these muscles that are around the thumb area, the base of the thumb, and also a bit down the side of the hand. And then the middle is usually a bit of a dip inward. So I'm just paying attention to those shapes, and I've now just added a subsurf modifier, and I can get a better look at how this mesh is going to look smoothed out and make any adjustments accordingly. Happy with that, I'm going to try out something a little bit advanced here that can really help me prepare for modeling the thumb and getting the palm area looking nice. As you can see, I'm pushing these 2 loops of vertices outward from the center. So these 2 loops just around the palm area, I'm pushing towards the fingers, and the other side towards the wrist, and leaving that middle loop right there in the middle. And then also going to push some of these vertices back, and basically what I'm going to create is an outline for the thumb that will extrude out from the hand. So I'm preparing some of these vertices, and after which I'll make a big gap in the mesh that I can pull the thumb out with. And also because of the large thumb muscle there, I'm also going to bring some of these vertices downward and out to really show the thickness of that area. And I'll push some of the vertices back towards the palm a bit. And when I'm happy, I might just push these two vertices down as well. And what you're left with are some very wide faces there, or quite high, I guess you could say. Exact placement doesn't matter too much at this point, but as long as you've got all these vertices pushed down towards the palm and you've got these faces here that are quite large that will form the area of the thumb cross section. So there you go, I just switched to face view and deleted those three faces. I'll then just tweak some of the vertices to prepare for extruding out the mesh to create the thumb. Now the amount of vertices that make up this gap is how many I'll be extruding with, so I figure I might just join these 4 vertices into a face, as these 6 vertices that remain that create the gap are more than enough that I'll need to create the thumb. And I can always add more loop cuts later on if I need to add detail. So I'll just Alt-right click there to select the whole outline of the gap, and then I can extrude in top view, rotate, and also hit W and smooth, and repeat that a few times to make the shape a bit more rounded like the thumb. I'll now place this so that you have 2 vertices that are around the crease area of the thumb in my outline, and another 2 at the back just near the joint of the thumb, basically the knuckle area of the thumb, and then 2 in the middle that will help flesh out the shape. Again, I'll extrude out, smooth down a few more times to make the cross section smaller and much more rounder again. And here I can just play around with the height and width of the thumb. And the thumb also naturally points downward if you hold your palm out straight, so each extrusion I'm also just moving the entire loop downward a bit in the on the Z-axis. And you can see that I'm kind of creating this this larger edge at the flat area of the thumb. And I'm making the mesh a little bit thinner than my outline in some places, especially where you've got these longer edges like at the flat part of the thumb, and they will be fleshed out a bit later and given some thickness. So now I'm just making another extrusion, getting very close to the tip of the thumb now. I'm going to move a couple of vertices out towards the tip of the nail, and finally one more extrusion, which I'm going to smooth right down and make quite small as we reach the tip of the thumb. Again, making sure to keep that downward motion of the thumb with each extrusion that I make. And I'm going to join those 2 faces together, as it's 6 vertices that will make nicely 2 quads. And then I'll just tweak those vertices to give the feeling of a nail being there. The aim is that he'll be wearing some thin, black, cloth-like gloves around his hands. So even though they're sticking very close to his hand, I decide there won't really be a need to model the nails in this case. And with the tip of the thumb making 2 clean faces, I've got this nice loop that I can cut right across both sides of the thumb and the side of the hand. At that point I'm just going to Alt-S scale out a little bit, and that will help give the thumb a bit of its thickness. And I've also only made about 1 cut per knuckle, so I'm just going to add some in-between loops in the cross sections, like here at the end of the nail. I can give the indication here where the skin kind of comes back up a bit higher from the nail. And even though we haven't modeled the nail itself, that will still give a bit of an indication of the shape there. And I can also push out this vertex here to give a slight indication of a joint in the thumb. And again, for this larger joint further back, I'll make these cross sections, and also I can smooth out this angle at the back of the thumb. There's always a tendon that runs along from the thumb to the wrist in the side there, so you don't want to have the angle too sharp. And then again, looking at my own hand, I'm just going to use the vertices that I have there to flesh out the inside of the thumb joints, and just add any more loop cuts if I feel like I'm not getting the detail that I want out of the vertices that are there. I'm just going to uncheck Subsurf in edit mode, where the vertices stick to the mesh so that I can see the cage around the outside of the Subsurf mesh. And just making a couple of tweaks to the tip of the thumb and the joint areas, making them a little bit more defined. So you can see I've got this whole muscle around the thumb with this one line of vertices, and the others are just pushed out towards the either side of the palm, the front and back, to help give the indication of creases. So by pushing those vertices either side, it gives me a little bit of a sharper area around the muscle of the thumb at the bottom of the palm. Again, I'm going to just thin down the gap area here that will be our fingers. I don't want to make that too fat. So with the thumb done and some extra hand tweaks there in preparation around the fingers area, I'll select the whole loop around the fingers and just extrude with E outward. Notice that I have a vertice lined up at each crease between the fingers, and also another vertice right at the knuckles. So I'm going to grab these in between the finger vertices that have been lined up just where the skin stretches across the fingers, and I'm going to move them down. So you're going to have this up down position of the vertices across the top, and also a little bit at the bottom here, and I'll line them up the same. Now you notice that to get that vertice between each knuckle and crease in the finger, I just needed to make another loop cut at the bottom so that I can match the same amount of vertices at the top and bottom. And you can see there now you've got this waving motion at both ends. And from there I'm just going to connect an edge at the first crease of the fingers between the index and middle finger, subdivide once, and then I can grab this whole loop, -1 since I made that loop cut earlier, and just extrude them out. And then I can just join the gap together so that I've got one less vertice in that cross section. Now I'll just squish the vertices together by scaling on X a little. I'll tweak a couple of vertices at this point just having a look at the top of the knuckles area again before I can concentrate now on the index finger. Now I figure I might just include that other vertex in the loop cut, so I've just made a loop cut and merged those two together, as this is the correct amount of vertices that I'll use for the finger. If I need to push the finger further back or forward, I can always just grab all of these vertices together and just move them back. as I might do here. And when I'm happy with that, I can start extruding out further out to form the finger. I'm going to give the appearance of this this arc that goes outward in the middle and then pulls back more at the top. And then after making another extrusion, I'm just going to scale across the y-axis only to mirror that shape. So what you get are these two mirrored arcs, one arcing concave and one arcing convex. I'll make another extrusion and just straighten those vertices out again. Those two arcs of the cross sections will come in handy a bit later on. That area is a joint of one of the digits. Two more extrusions now, and with this second extrusion we start reaching the point of the nail and the pad area of the tip of the finger at the bottom. So I'm going to push that vertice down at the bottom and also dip the vertice back and in a little bit to represent the dip in the skin as the nail is starting. I'm also going to widen the finger a bit at the tip here. And with this last extrusion, I can just scale on various different axes to give me a bit more control over the general size and shape of this last cross section. I'll join the top and bottom vertices together with an edge with F, subdivide once, and then I can connect up 4 faces. From there I'll just tweak the shape a bit more again and get the nice round shape of the tip of the finger. And just smooth out any areas of the mesh that are a little bit over-defined. I can push these vertices back that have been lowered down a bit to make the nail appear a bit longer underneath the cloth. And there's our first finger blocked and ready to add details. I'll start with this main joint of the finger here, and I'll just add an edge loop in between the two concave and convex edge loops, and I'll take that top vertice and push it up to show the joint and the bone. Demonstrate a very good technique for below finger and thumb joints. Now I'm going to take these 3 vertices at the bottom and rip the edges with V, making sure the cursor is on the palm side of the vertices to indicate which way you'd like to rip the vertices out. I'll just place this area of vertices where I'd like. And now I'm going to just join the gaps together with edges and subdivide once so that there's a vertice in the middle of each edge. And then I can start adding 2 faces each in the middle and then a diamond quad on either side. And what we're left with is this little extra edge loop just in this area, and if I scale that down you can see that it creates a little dip, and on either side then I can push the vertices out a little bit more, and what you're left with is this nice crease looking area, and it works fantastic for below finger joints and such. I can then just grab those middle vertices and move them to give it a shape that I like. I'll now just repeat that with the next digit joint. Rip the 3 vertices, join the faces, add an edge loop in the middle, and then make 2 diamond quads on either side, and then you can just push and pull in and out the vertices to give it its shape, and you've got the vertices there to assist. And then I'll just make a couple more in between edge loop cuts, just to puff out some of the fleshy areas of the finger between the joints. So now we have a completed index finger, and luckily we won't have to model all of the fingers manually. We can simply just select vertices from the first time we extruded the finger out, duplicate, and then by keeping the finger and rotating it to be straight on in the grid, you can squish and pull it to make it longer or flatter with the different axes scaling along them, and then just place the finger over the outline. From there, it's just a matter of reattaching faces to the original hand mesh. And due to keeping the same amount of vertices, knuckle in between finger, knuckle in between finger, it should be all the same amount of vertices that you need to connect, and there won't be any missing or not. It looks like I've turned up one vertice short on the hand mesh here at the pinky area. So it looks like that's the only point I'll need to deal with. I'll move some of the vertices down a bit to match the other loops. And I'll turn off subsurf while in edit mode. I'll edge slide some of these vertices down to move them all in a group. And then I can just add in another loop cut here. Again, I'll just go through and spread some of the vertices out so that they're not too close together, forming unnaturally sharp edges and creases. And since I'm in this area, I just figure I'll look at my own wrist a bit and flesh out the shape of that. It won't really be seen much in the final character, so I'm not too worried about that area of the hand. What I am noticing is that maybe the pinky finger is a little bit out of place in terms of its up and down height. So just by selecting some of these vertices, and even some of the hand and palm that I notice, I can manipulate the pinky either down or up a bit and fatten the area out. I've just smoothed out the vertices of that cut that I made. And then I've got the right amount of vertices to match up two quads. So I'm feeling really happy about that, though it does look quite flat around his knuckle area. We do have that one vertice pushing up, but it really doesn't have the feeling that there's a bone under there pushing the skin up. So I'll make a few tweaks just to the hand, having a look at the shape as a whole, and then we can move in to work on the knuckles and the in-between skin between the fingers. This gets a little bit advanced, but the outcome is really worth it, so I'll take you through it. I'll start by selecting this vertice here, and by hitting the V key I'll just split the edge upward towards the top of the knuckles, and then I'll split these two vertices here as well, it doesn't matter which way, and just spread the gap a little bit and join a face. Now I'm going to just take this vertice and move it down a bit, make an edge loop cut here with this face that we made, a bit similar to the bottom of the finger, and then just connect these two faces and just a diamond quad at the end. And now what this gives us is a vertice here that acts a bit like the slightly webbed skin between the fingers that you can push out to make as defined as we like. And the remaining vertices I can push and pull in and out to define the underside of the knuckle. I'll then repeat the same steps on the other two creases. So now we can have this effect of the skin stretching out from the bone in between the fingers. This area where the skin is stretching is actually surprisingly further away from the knuckles at the top there than you'd think. There's quite a bit of skin and veins that goes between the fingers before you actually reach the joints and the place where the fingers connect. Now just spending some more time looking at my own palm and fleshing out the muscly areas and the dips in the palm area. And playing around with the length of the skin that stretches between the fingers. Here I'm selecting an entire loop around the arm, and I'll just box deselect with B in the middle mouse drag to just select the vertices along the bottom, and I can push them a little closer to the fingers and outward just to help define the point between the palm and the fingers and make the area a little bit defined by pushing the vertices of this loop towards the other vertices at the start of the fingers. And I can just grab these two vertices individually at each finger and push them closer together as well, just to define the shape even more. With the bottom of the knuckles done, let's move on to the top. I'm going to switch to face selection mode and just select these 8 faces here. I'm going to extrude the vertices and cancel the auto move, but then I'm going to hit smooth just a couple of times before moving the vertices at all, and then just scale a little bit more and a little on the x-axis to make them thinner. I'll move these vertices up to define the very highest point of the knuckle. And these vertices along the middle here are going to define the tendon that you can see over most knuckles that then pulls back towards the wrist. This allows a smart way to get this shape without going really over the top with adding vertices by subdividing a whole bunch or some other method. I'm going to hit V key to rip away these 3 vertices. Make sure to have the cursor in the right position, that you pull out these 3 sides and keep the left side intact. And then I'm going to merge all 3 together to make this diamond quad gap in the middle, and I'll connect that into a face. And then I'm going to push this vertice down a bit to help define the dipping down between the knuckles. And then once again, I can move on to the other knuckles in the hand and repeat the exact same process. The area around this index finger is a little bit trickier to get the shape right, but after some pushing and pulling of vertices, I trust that the amount of vertices there can help define the shape, so I just need to find the right smoothness and placement to get it correct. And there we have our complete hand model. Now in the concept art, it seems like David has drawn something in the form of a hand guard, but we don't have an exact design for this, so I just went Googling, and this hand guard in particular I kind of liked. So I've put that image up in my external monitor, and I'll begin modeling something similar to this design. Place my 3D cursor just above the hand, and then I'll add a plane, scale it out to about the size of the palm itself. And just scale down these two vertices closer to the wrist, a bit smaller. Make a loop cut and just pull those vertices out about in line with the thumb joint. Scale down the vertices on the outside, and that loop cut that I just made horizontally, I'll scale out a bit. Then I've just made a loop cut down the middle, and I'll start pushing the vertices now in side view to flow down the top of the hand. And I'm just going to take the outside vertices and just move them down a bit and have the middle vertices out a little bit higher, just to give a curve to the handguard. I'm going to add a subsurf modifier now so I can get an idea of how it looks smooth. I'm not going to use too many vertices for this, so having an idea of the final smoothed mesh is going to help me a lot. Now I'm going to select all of the outside vertices, extrude them, right click to cancel the move, and then scale. And that adds a little lip around the entire guard, and also something that we can add loop cuts to later on. Then select all the vertices and extrude them in side view along the Z-axis. Now we're left with the nice, soft-edged handguard. I'll push and pull any vertices just to get rid of any intersections that are really noticeable. And it's looking pretty good even though we've got quite a simple mesh. I'm going to take the subsurf level up to 2 and then just play a bit with the shape. I've still got that reference of the handguard in my external monitor, but I'm not sticking strictly to that design. I'll then come in and add an edge loop to this outside loop that I made earlier from extruding all the vertices outward. And by doing that, allowed me to add edge loops like this so that I've got two very close to each other on the inside, and then I can extrude after selecting both of those edge loops. And what you get is a nice little trim to the outside. I can add another edge loop here on the side and just push it closer or further away from the corner to make the edge sharper or rounder. So I've opted to just push that side edge loop a little bit higher, so the top is a bit of a sharper bevel and the bottom sort of rounds out. From there I'll just play with the middle vertices here. I felt like it was a nice look that it dips down a bit in the middle and then puffs out a bit since the fingers are going to be moving up and down a bit. So a bit of distance upward at the edge of the handguard will facilitate it. So that's our hand and our handguard complete. All that's left is to match it up to the rest of our ninja before we move on. I'm going to turn off the background image. Just move both objects out of edit mode and rotate and place basically to the position where I'm going to need it. I kind of like the hands that size, but yeah, I decided I'd better scale them down to a more reasonable scale. Now, hands can be a very tricky aspect to a character to proportion right. So I'm going to spend a bit of time really subtly scaling outward and inward and seeing what works. And when I'm happy, I can just proportional edit the vertices around the wrist to match to the bandaged area of the forearm. I'll get rid of any intersections. And I can play with the amount of wrist that is showing outside of the bandages and also the length of that forearm. I'll come in and add a mirror modifier. But before that has the proper effect, I'm going to have to just come in and to the search menu and type rotation, and I'll just select apply rotation to the hand object. And that will get the flip direction correct. Lastly, I'll just select and snap the 3D cursor to the torso's object center. And then again, by going to the search menu, I'll choose set origin at the object center. I'll just repeat the same thing for the hand guard. Set the origin at the center of the torso, the same origin as the torso object, which is dead center on the Z-axis, and then just apply the rotation of the object so that the axes are all resetted back to normal. I also figure I might just pull the handguard back a bit just to go over the bandages a little so that it doesn't look too scruffy. And that's really our upper body complete. We'll be adding accessories and the goggles, etc. later on. But for now, I'm really happy with the whole upper body of our ninja. And from there we begin moving onward to the lower part of the body. And we can really start seeing this ninja take shape.